And welcome to our latest edition of our Karmayogi Talks. And I'm very delighted that today we have someone who's going to talk about a topic that a lot of you have asked for, which is communications and storytelling. And I'm delighted that we have Professor Mihir Mankad. He's an award-winning professor of practice of leadership communication and has taught over 5,000 graduate students to date from Tufts, Harvard, Ashoka, and the Indian School of Business. His flagship Art of Communications course became the highest enrolled elective at the Fletcher School. By the way, his course on storytelling is also on IGOT. So those of you who want to follow up can take that course. So he's taught over 7,000 executives across US, India, and around the world. And part of the reason he's so good is that he served as a national TV anchor with NDTV, Z, and Doordarshan in both business news and sports. He has anchored some of the most viewed sports events of all time, including the 2008 and 2021 Olympics, the Delhi Commonwealth Games, and the 2011 World Cup. He also served as a consultant with McKinsey India and Bain US and managed the India operation of the Clinton Foundation. He has an MPA as a Mason Scholar from Harvard Kennedy School, an MBA from Kellogg, and a BA from Stanford in Psychology and Economics, where he was also part of the national championship tennis teams. So he's covered many things, and today we're going to not concentrate on sports, Mihir, but we're going to concentrate on communications. And one of the questions, the reason we wanted to have this is, the 3 million central civil servants are very dedicated and have very deep technical knowledge of their work. And they often ask, how can I communicate what I know and what I need to communicate better? It's something that people ask for a lot. So it is in that context, Mihir, that we are delighted to welcome you to this Karmayogi talk. And I'll now leave the floor open to you. Go ahead, Mihir.
Yeah, Adil, thank you very much. Let me start off by saying it's a real honor to be here. It's actually quite surreal because just almost to the day, 20 years ago, I joined McKinsey India, and Adil was the super boss, and he was the one doing the public speaking and communication. And I was at the back of the room listening to him. So it's a real honor to be invited by the Capacity Building Commission and by Karmayogi Bharat to do this talk. We have about an hour or so. So what I'm going to try to do is try to bring some of the highlights and the best of my teaching to the group here. I will let you know that I've had the honor of also going to Missouri and doing a workshop for trainees of the Indian Administrative Service, as well as the Indian Foreign Service. And this is a real joy to bring some of the best of my work to the civil services. So, Adil, as we discussed before, the way my classes have worked over about 250 plus times that I've taught them is that they've always had an interactive component. In that I generally have, as you've seen in HBS, a Socratic style teaching where we kind of feed off from the members in the audience. So I will be using you as to represent the audience while I go through some of my case studies. And then we'll just have a bit of an interactive discussion that way. So let me start off by saying that most people, when they sign up for a course on public speaking or on storytelling, they often think about the strategies or sort of quick hits in terms of sharpening how they should speak. What should I do with my hands? What should I do with my eyes? How should I think about presence and walking into the room? And I feel that while some of those are important, it's become increasingly important for leaders for today to have a couple of skills. And those are around one, being more concise and precise in the age of decreasing attention spans. Adil, you mentioned that a couple of times in your talks too. And then also the ability to draw on your most relaxed and authentic self in the most challenging communication scenarios. And people often feel that this is not something that you can learn, but through doing these classes, I have grown to believe that it's possible to move the needle here. So right off the bat, we're going to get the chairman of your Capacity Building Commission a little bit on the spot to face what is the world's greatest fear, which is public speaking and being asked some questions on the spot. So Adil, are you ready?
Yes. I feel like
Okay,
I'm back
great.
in the classroom, but yes, I'm ready.
Yes. Okay. So Adil, what I'm going to do is simulate something that actually happened, and it happened on the other side of the world about a decade and a couple of years ago. So this is a question that was asked to a couple of very popular leaders in the United States at that time, but leaders that I think most people will know and can connect with. So at that time, Hillary Clinton was going against Barack Obama to decide who should be the Democrat nominee from the United States. So as you know, in the United States, there are two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. Democrats are the ones on the left, Republicans on the right. As in India, you have Congress and BJP, primarily two parties left and right. But there it was, in the United States, you have primary elections, even for the candidate of the party not in power, to decide who should be their candidate. So the day before the first primary election, both Hillary and Barack Obama, then a much younger senator out of the state of Illinois, were called onto the national TV channel, ABC, and they were called into an auditorium. And there was a panel of anchors asking them some questions that they could respond to in a fairly short amount of time, pretty short answers. They've been campaigning for a year, so they had to give short answers on a 22-minute show the day before the first primary election. Now, both of them were seasoned speakers. They've had a lot of political experience, but Hillary had much more experience at that time. So she was about 12 years older. Now, this was a specific question asked to Hillary Clinton. And whether you know her background or not, I just want you to think about how you could respond to this question. So I'm going to play it out just as it happened. It came after the commercial break. No, so we're not going to show the video yet. We're going to play this out first as a question, and then I will show the video. So sound check is good from Karmayogi, good. Sound check, good. Visual check is good. Anchor standby. Last commercial is rolling. Hillary standby. First question coming to you. Hillary Clinton, played by Adil Zainulbhai. And we will go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cue anchor. Okay, Hillary Clinton, what do you have to say to the voters of New Hampshire and an entire nation who appreciate all the experience that you bring, including your time in the White House, but who seem to like Barack Obama more?
I would say if you want to improve your lives and you want to get things done, you need someone who has the experience to make that happen. If you want to have a wonderful chat show, then you should vote for Barack Obama. If you want to get something done, you should vote for Hillary Clinton.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Adil. Thank you. In fact, a little round of
I'm not a
applause,
very good politician, so I hope that answer is not completely crazy.
I do ask this question to most executives, and sometimes they say, no, I've not been in politics. But then so I reframe it and I say that, look, let's imagine you've been working very hard and your supervisor comes to you and say that you are one of 2 finalists for the next position. But your supervisor comes to you and says to you, we appreciated all the hard work and the extra experience that you have, but we decided to promote your colleague because she was more likable. And then what would you say to the same question? And so first of all, Adil, you were able to hear the question. I love the fact that you took a few seconds and then you kept your poise and you gave a response. A lot of times, even that is difficult for people when they're put on the spot. And you also gave a response that I have now heard for about 70% of the responses converge to this point. If I may take the liberty of re-summarizing what you shared, you said that, look, this is not a popularity contest. It's about experience, and I have more, right? And you said it in your own words. You said it differently, and I think that's a very good response. It's a common response. However, as you know, the criteria that we're trying to move the needle on in this question is around likability, right? That's what they're asking. And while I think a lot of times the default response might be that, no, it shouldn't be about likability, but it should be about experience, that doesn't move the needle on likability itself. So, I just say, okay, let's say that was a very good first round. If you could redo this response, if you could pick anything else, let's rewind. Let's go right back and say, okay, 3, 2, 1, anchor cue. Welcome back, Hillary. We know of your time in the White House, of your time as a senator already. But if we have a question for you, people really do appreciate your experience, but seem to like Barack Obama more. What is your comment?
A very large proportion of voters like me for who I am, and like me because because of what I've done, but they like me because I have a family. I've grown up in a tough neighborhood, and I have developed what I have developed, which is more like their experience, and that is why people like me.
Yes, thank you, Adil. So I do appreciate now what you've done here is you try to make the audience the hero, if you will, and you kind of connected with a shared experience, right? And sort of you're coming through, not because people think that you are the wife of an ex-president, Bill Clinton, but you also gone through some of the tough times and got to this position. So I see this is, this is a different response. And I'll tell you, I hear maybe 5 or 6 different types of responses in the hundreds of times that I've done this. And this certainly tends to be one that I've heard. But the second most popular response after the one around experience versus popularity is around the fact that perhaps because I'm a woman, right, that perhaps I'm not taken as seriously or as likable because people aren't used to seeing women in these positions of power and authority. And while I do believe that there might be some truth to that, I think it's a little awkward if Hillary said it herself. It would be probably better served if someone was saying this for her, right? So what did Hillary Clinton say? Now, I don't think she has been perfect by any means, but I loved her response. And in my humble opinion, I haven't heard a better response. So what she did is she took this question and she broke it down into 3 short things that I thought were very human versus political. So the first thing that she said was, "Oh, that hurts my feelings." Pause. Okay. Says, I mean, this you can imagine if someone's telling you, you've been working throughout your life, but you weren't as likable. This is a normal reaction. That's what you would feel. So she said, "Oh, that hurts my feelings." And after the pause, she thought about it, and then a bit of a smile came to her face, and she said, "But you know what? He is a really likable man." Right? And then the camera goes into the crowd. They see her daughter, Chelsea. People are smiling. She's turning around. The camera comes back to her. And all she says after that is, "But I don't think I'm that bad myself," and just lets it be. Now, see, I think this is your communication is a function of purpose, audience, and message. Now, if you're with one to few, one-to-one in an important meeting, you can go through, well, what survey are you talking about? Where I also, this is what I've done, this is what happened in my rallies. But when you're speaking to such a larger common denominator, I thought it was very astute on her part to just give a very human response. And this response received a 95% favorability rating. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Now, there's a second part to it. Adil, please, you've been a lovely sport. I'm going to put you on the spot one more time.
But I'm likable too.
Yes, that you are. And thank you very much for going with this. But this really happens. So we're going to watch this 45-second clip of this interaction. But there's a second part to it. Right after Hillary says these 3 things, the camera goes to Barack Obama. No question is asked, but the red light is on. And he's been told that when the red light is on your camera, you're supposed to speak. Now, there are about 5,000 people in the auditorium, but 30 million people on the other side. A lot of swing voters deciding. Okay. And this is prime time ABC. It's like Doordarshan. Basically, everyone has the channel in the United States. Camera goes to him. His red light comes on. You are Barack Obama. What do you say?
I like you too, Hillary.
Thank you. Great. I like you too, Hillary. Now, I think it's not fair to have someone with as much experience as you do to be representative of, the typical audience. But a lot of times there is a sense of people saying, but Hillary, no, you are, you're great and you're also good. But I've done this. What you demonstrated here, Adil, is that sometimes less is more. And, sometimes that less says a lot. Now, I like you too. If I may, I would also suggest that a good response in this scenario would have just been "Thank you, Hillary."
Mm.
Thank you. Anything you say after "Thank you, Hillary" becomes a little bit of a landmine. So thank you, Hillary. But by the way, you also, or I have also done this, or don't forget. And you'd be surprised, but a large number of people will feel that you need to fill up that space with something else. As you know, one of the classic pieces on business strategy by Michael Porter was called "What is Strategy?" And the box summary of that article was the essence of business strategy lies in knowing what not to do as a business. And sometimes the essence of sharp communication also lies in knowing what not to say. So I loved your response of "I like you too, Hillary," but perhaps even "Thank you, Hillary" could have worked, where you don't even need to share your opinion. But I think both of these responses were strong. Now, in the heat of the moment, what people don't recognize is that public speaking is a very big and true fear. And even for the world, some of the world's best speakers, when they're put on the spot, sometimes your mind will block or not give the most relaxed and optimal outcome. So as much as you and I would respect Barack Obama as a politician and as a great person, it wasn't necessarily his best day. Then that moment for the response to the words that actually came out of his mouth were, "Oh, you're likable enough, Hillary." Now, why I think, it's open to interpretation, but I think he was just trying to help her. But he faced, even the best, one of the greatest orators, faced that public speaking stress. And that is what he ended up saying. Now, what that response does is if you share that response, and we'll watch it in a little bit, we find that this response is seen as unfavorable by 60% or more of the viewers. Now, 30 to 40% will say, no, he's just trying to help her out. He just meant, that Hillary, you got a difficult question. Thank you for the compliment. And I like you too. But these are the words that came out. The next day, the newspaper headlines in New Hampshire, at least one of the papers, had that Barack Obama comes across as condescending or patronizing. One word, enough. Right? And he was supposed to win the election, I think, by 3 points. And next day, Hillary scores a 1-point upset victory in New Hampshire. And this is played out on all the highlight reels. Now, you can't say all of it was due to one response, but it certainly got a lot of views and coverage. And both Hillary and Obama have talked about this interaction. Now, to me, this is a great example of communication presence. But I want you to see the full picture, because I have explained to you what they said, but it's also the body language that gives a signal. So what did they say and how they said it? May I please request that you play out that first clip of Hillary versus Obama and share it on the screen?
Yeah, we're just playing it.
Mhm.
My question to you is simply this. What can you say to the voters of New Hampshire on this stage tonight who see your resume and like it, but are hesitating on the likability issue, where they seem to like Barack Obama more?
Well, that hurts my feelings.
I'm sorry, Senator. I'm sorry.
But I'll try to go on. He's very likable. I agree with that. I don't think I'm that bad.
You're likable enough.
Thank you
Hillary,
so
no
much.
doubt.
I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Great. Please, we can stop it now, and you can just come back to the full screen for us. Okay. So
That was terrific.
Adil,
It's like a 10-second clip that says so much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is the harder part to teach. But so as you I'm sure will agree and would have seen, this is really what senior leaders and executives, and I think at all levels, you need some of this practice for spontaneous impromptu speaking, but it's hard to simulate it on a day-to-day basis. When you have a larger prepared speech, you can take your own time to prepare it. but often what is asked and was asked from you so many times, and you had done town hall meetings, both in your past career at McKinsey and also in your scenario. And I just, what we try to do in the classroom is to try to create simulations where you can also practice your impromptu muscle. But for right now, just on this case study, Adil, what was your thought on the body language of mini Barack Obama? How did you see it? Did that make it more favorable or less favorable for you, his response?
I think the body language made it less favorable, and it may be the camera angle or whatever, but he was stiff. He was looking down. She was smiling, and he was not. You could see that very clearly, and I don't think we pay attention to how we look in these impromptu moments. But yeah, it was the expression and angle of the body was not really, it was condescending, to be honest.
Yeah. So as you well know, that communication is a function of what you say, how much you say, and how you say it. And here, when I have shown this case study over about 150 times to groups, executive groups, graduate students in the United States and in India and also in Europe, and it's quite similar, the reactions. Now, on that body language, there are some people, so I'd say about 30% who would say that watching him, he really didn't seem as condescending as you made it out, or as we got the impression from you, and as the newspaper made it out. But then the slightly larger group actually says no, that he wasn't looking at her. He was looking down. He kind of said it quickly, and that didn't give the right body language. Now, it's as you think about this, you want to think about your purpose, audience, and message. Now, if you want to go, you'd rather go deeper with a few people, you can say, I don't mind what the majority thinks. I'd rather go deeper and connect with the group that I've targeted. But if you're trying to have communication that reaches a large group, and if you will, a lower common denominator where people across all functions, all strata of society are watching and judging you, then I think you don't want to have a response that is as polarizing. And what I've realized is that communication presence, that skill is like riding a bicycle. The more you do it without really thinking about how you're doing it better, it just gets better for you. So as you know, with riding a bicycle, you don't tell yourself that your right foot needs to be at 94 degrees and left foot at this degree. After a while, you just get it. But this is an insight that I feel like I discovered being a television anchor. I had a little bit of an unusual background to do a lot of corporate work, then get into television at a mid-career stage, and then start teaching. But I realized that a huge difference from day 2 of anchoring versus day 200 was that time slows down for you. And it seems like you have more time to formulate a response, even in these pressure situations. A lot of times when you're hosting, say, the Olympics, there are 11,000 athletes, there are 200 events, there are 40 sports, and on television, they ask you in your talk back to just switch mid-sentence when there's a medal ceremony, or they say go from fencing to track and field. And initially you feel, how can I listen to the producer? How can I listen to my co-anchor? How can I process the results and speak live on TV for 30 million people? But you'd be surprised, after doing this over and over again, everything slows down for you. And that's one of the thoughts, and I feel I want to bring to leaders, that there is value in practice, that there's as much nurture as there is nature in communication. Any thoughts as we close this case study?
I thought the lessons that you gave, I thought were very interesting. Couple that I took away was say less, not more. That was, I think, for many of us, that's a very good guidance, because we otherwise we talk a lot, was one. And I think your idea of think about the purpose, the audience, and the message, and that non-verbal, how you respond, etc., matters a lot. I think all of those are very valuable things to think about for every interaction that we have, whether it's a large group or a small group.
Yeah, thank you. And I do emphasize concise and precise. I think that's a very important skill for the workplace. Now, please don't quote me at home on this, but I think largely it is very valuable to have that ability to draw on it when you need it. And concise and precise does not mean short always, right? It means that every line, every section has a purpose. But as you said, and I've said, in the book that I've written on communication, that attention spans are getting shorter, and there is a need for people, even if they choose not to in their personal lives, to be able to develop this ability to be compelling by being concise and precise. So as we talk about concise, as we talk about being able to meet short attention spans, and we talk about time, right? Time for communication. And in one of your talks, Adil, I've watched that you shared that if you were to share a subject area and used to say, well, here's a 6-day course, then you might have X number take the class. And then you say, no, here's the course in 1 day, then you'll have 5X people taking the class. And you say, no, here's the course in 2 hours, and you'll have 20X taking the class. And you say, well, let me tell you in 10, 15 minutes, then you'll have many more people signing up. So there's an art to packaging communication. But towards all of this, let's get to one number. Let's say, usually this is a soft skill subject, and people don't know if they can get a number, but I think there's one very valuable number that it's very important to recognize and to recognize for life. And that is understanding the speed of speech. So when I post this question, it's a big lament of mine that very few people know this. And in fact, I'd say 95% of people in my class are not even close to that real number. There is a feeling amongst individuals across the world that I can manage speaking as, typically a range of words in a certain amount of time. That I can speak, twice as fast as her, or someone spoke slower, or people used to say, well, Atal Bihari Vajpayee spoke much, 1/3 of the speed that I speak. But you'd be surprised that the speed of speech actually converges to a certain number. And if you take the distribution of speaking speed across individuals around the world, even when Mandarin has 1 syllable per word typically, and Japanese is 2 syllables per word, you'd be surprised that distribution is narrower than a normal distribution with no tail. So there's a little bit of a range, but nowhere near what people think it could be. The human ear has been trained, and evolved to process communication, especially verbal communication, at a certain speed. Okay. And what is that speed of speech? Now, let me just ask, so Adil, of course, you will, again, not be representative, but let's put you on the spot one more time. Let's say you have a very important talk for which they've given you 5 minutes. As you know, at many, at United Nations, they even cut the mics off of heads of states because there's 180 opinions on climate change and so forth, and everything's becoming time. But let's say they give you 5 minutes, 300 seconds, and you want to prepare, the best piece possible. If you speak for those 300 seconds, how many words will be on your transcript? Sorry, Adil, I'm not sure I could hear you. Sorry.
300.
300. That, Adil, is the most popular response to this question. So I do this interactively. I say, okay, let's do it in bands. How many say 0 to 100? You'd be surprised if people say below 100. Then they say 150. No, I think 1 word every 2 seconds. 200 to 300 happens to be the most popular band for this response. A few people say, well, a little over a word a second. Then by the time we get to about 450 words, so 500 words in 300 seconds, almost all hands are lowered. Maybe there's 2 people or 3 people that'll have out of a class of, say, 40. Maybe 1 person. And then I say 500 to 600, 600 to 700, 700 to 800, no hands up. Interestingly, there was a foreign service batch from India that had come, and that included one of the ex, very senior official, in fact, one of the president's ex-speechwriters. And when he heard this answer, he just said, this is absolutely true. I've written so many speeches, and that's exactly it. I just wish more people knew about it, and I wish I knew that, just that number. And he actually made speeches to that level, but he said, I wish I knew this number. So here's a number that I would like to request, and I hope that many of the people watching will remember this for life. The speed of speech across cultures is about 2.5 words per second On television, they say try to get it to 3 for sports TV. So I would say
Wow.
it's that range 2.5 to 2.7. So Adil, that most popular response that you gave is not just off by a little bit, it's off significantly. In 300 seconds, you will speak about 750 words. This is what television channels use. Every second is important when they're doing anchor links, when you're writing out your links on the cases, when you can read off the teleprompter, you base it at that rate. And it's immensely helpful to plan according to that. Because if you have planned, say you plan for 200 seconds for a 7-minute speech, you will finish that speech in less than a third of the time.
Mm.
Now, in my courses on public speaking, students typically in the full semester course, they have to deliver 3 4-minute speeches. And so I've heard about 5,000 of them, and about 80 of them I have put into a book called Minutes of Magic. These are the benchmark speeches across the world. And just on those speeches, because they're in the book, I took a word count. And the average word count for those 80 speeches that were given 4 minutes is 604 words. Now, if you multiply 240 seconds by 2.5, you get 600. So it's that close. Now, you may be able to read 3 times as fast as your neighbor, okay, or 5 times as fast, but you will not be able to speak 1.5 times as fast or slower. I can assure you this. Take any TED Talk, take the word count, divide by the number of seconds, see the result that you find. Now, let me demonstrate this. I just spoke about 9 words in 3 seconds. If I were to speak like this, then it would be 1 word a second, right? So this is accounting for natural pauses between sentences. And unless there's something, you have any kind of dramatic pauses or any Q&A, of course, then your speed is disrupted. But if you are just doing a normal, say, TED Talk type presentation, that is the speed of speech. Okay, so this is the second tool. I think the first one was around, there were 2 components. One is purpose, audience, and message. And 2 is communication presence for the Hillary versus the Obama example, where I defined it as your ability to draw on your most relaxed and authentic self in the most challenging communication scenarios, and something that needs practice. And I think the third nugget, if you will, for today is I want you to remember the speed of speech. I also, whatever you get from today's workshop, it would be a joy if you become teachers and share it. I have no IP issues. Please, the world is very large, and most people who need to know this do not have often the access. So please share any of this liberally with people that you know. Okay. All right. So a couple of concepts covered. Now, I did start off with a case study, Adil, for our team from the other side of the world, from the United States, because I felt the learning there from that case study was very authentic. There was a recording, and we could internalize it to situations here. So from the United States, and a woman put under pressure there to communicate, let's come to India, and let's take a case study of a woman, an Indian woman, also around concise and precise communication. Now, Adil, if I could ask you another question here.
Sure.
And usually I can open it up to the audience, but if I was to ask you, as far as women's Indian speakers, who are some of the most prominent that come to mind?
Today or just over time?
You can say today too, but over time, I think, in the modern day, if you will. So if you will, in this field of business primarily, as we're going to look at a businesswoman.
In India, somebody who's very concise and smart would be somebody like Indra Nui, who's been around the world, of course. But if you look in India, the 3 women who were very high up in ICICI and ran various banks like, Shikha Sharma, Renuka Ramnath, are very good. Preetha Reddy of Apollo is a very good speaker in the business world.
Yeah, yes. And I absolutely agree with you. I think these speakers have really, especially over the last few years, have really come to the fore and been excellent in their communication, especially their ability to draw on sort of concise and precise communication too. However, if I was to do this survey across a larger group, I think three names have primarily stood out over the last decade and a half. Indra Nooyi has topped the list, even though she has lived most of her life in the United States. She still tops that list as one of the most prominent women business speakers. Number two in this list happens to be Kiran Majumdar-Shaw. Now, of
Yes.
course, she's been around as a leader of Biocon for many years, but she also has very good recall amongst the typical public and groups taking my classes. And then third in recent times has been Sudha Murthy, even though she's not purely a business woman, but she's all in this top three ranking. And after that, there is a little bit of a gap. And I absolutely agree with you being in the space. I think you would recognize Renuka and some of the other names you mentioned, but I think it's these three have consistently topping the list, and the list doesn't get much larger. And I hope that's something that can change, that we can have a large list of women speakers that are top of mind in the years to come, and not just 5 or 6 or 7. And I think that list is increasing. But today we will focus on a communication piece by the first person you mentioned, Indra Nooyi. Now, as most people would likely know, but just as context, Indra Nooyi served as chairman for one of the world's most iconic brands and companies, PepsiCo. PepsiCo makes not just the drink, but also it was the world's largest snack food company. And today we're going to watch a communication piece that is not the typical one. She has spoken many times on leadership, on leading from the front. She's also spoken quite eloquently on being able to break the glass ceiling. But today, towards our case study, we're going to watch her short speech at an award ceremony. So NDTV was recognizing on its 25th anniversary a set of global global luminaries in different fields. So they were calling it the greatest global living legends, and Indra Nooyi received an award for being the greatest global living legend in business. Now, this was a function where the president of India was there. He actually conferred the honor. Amitabh Bachchan and Dr. Prannoy Roy were giving the awards when these personalities were coming up. A.R. Rahman had just won the award for music right before Indra Nooyi. And then she gets called and she gets on stage. Now, she can come and speak for what typically should seem like 10 minutes or so, at an award ceremony. That makes sense. But she comes to stage and speaks for exactly 2 minutes. So 120 seconds. And how much can be covered in 2 minutes, and what can be covered? So let's first watch this video, and then I'll come and share some frameworks that we can think through this piece. So can we please play out the video of Indra Nooyi?
We're just playing it. Hang on.
Okay, yeah. It's just queued up, so please hang on for a few seconds. This is in New Delhi that she's receiving the award.
Nooyi.
I was born in a great democracy. I live in another great democracy. Indians are capable of an enormous amount, and I think accelerating investments in infrastructure would be my #1 priority. Any CEO has to be big enough, brave enough, bold enough to face the critics. And personally, I'm ready for all of these fights.
Mr. President and NDTV, thank you very much for this incredible honor. Malcolm Gladwell in his book, The Outliers, said, "Who you are cannot be separated from where you came from." I left India 35 years ago, went on to the United States, and had tremendous success in that meritocracy. But none of that could have happened if I hadn't had a wonderful upbringing very much here in India. So I have a lot to thank India for. Now, my 3 lessons I'd like to share with you. First, please be a lifelong student. When we are kids, we ask questions like, why is the sky blue? Why is the bird flying so high? But for some reason, as we get older, that curiosity goes away. And if we are happy with the knowledge we have, then we are actually going to atrophy. So please remain a lifelong student. Don't lose that curiosity. Second, whatever you do, throw yourself into it. Throw your head, heart, and hands into it. I look at my job not as a job. I look at it as a calling, as a passion. And I don't care about the hours. I don't care about the hardship, because to me, everything is a joy. So whatever you do, please look upon it as a calling and a passion, not as a job, not as something temporary. The third and the most important one, please help others rise. Greatness comes not from a position, but from helping build the future. All of us in positions of power have an obligation to pull others up. As I stand here today, I look at my responsibility not as accepting an honor. I look upon it as accepting a challenge and a responsibility, an obligation to actually make it possible for the people who are younger to come up and achieve levels of greatness so they too can be on the stage sometime in the future. So thank you again, NDTV, for this incredible honor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so we can stop. Thank you. Thank you for playing this out. Now, this speech went a bit viral, and the title of it given on YouTube was "Don't Miss Indra Nooyi's 2-minute speech." So just that 2-minute component attracted a lot of people. And I think that's it's becoming increasingly important even for luminaries to be able to create a message in a short amount of time for it to have that ability to spread. Adil, please don't mind, but I'm going to have you back on for some just a little bit of some back and forth on this piece. Now, you heard in this piece that Indra Nooyi talks about sort of 3 lessons, but I would argue that in these 4 minutes, she makes 4 points. If I may ask you, what were those 4 points in your mind?
I think she started out by saying that who you are and where you came from, are both important. Where you came from shapes who you are. That was one big message that she gave. Second, she talked about the fact that, whatever she's doing, she wants people to throw themselves into it. The third interesting message, which she never pointed out, was she said she came to the US and succeeded in this meritocracy. Which I thought was an interesting thing to also pick up, right? Where she talked, which says that she earned it, right? It was a meritocracy. And that's why she did that. And then she said the last thing was that it's her obligation at the end, which was, I thought, very interesting to help others. But it was, she takes this award as an obligation, not as a celebration.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Adil. So if I may summarize, you mentioned the first one was around her roots and the fact that she hasn't forgotten her roots. And then she had 3 messages. One was be a lifelong student. 2 is help others, put your heart and head in what you do. And then 3rd is help others rise. Now, these were the 4 messages. Now, if you think about trying to break down a communication piece and structure it to learn from it, I would take us back all the way to Aristotelian times in ancient Greece. And Aristotle, the philosopher, who wrote quite a bit on communication and rhetoric, as he called it. And he said that basically, while there are many things that one can think about to be a good communicator, there are 3 most important pillars. And he called them logos, ethos, and pathos. Now, these are literally Greek words for content, credibility, and connect. Now, logos, he defined as the logical appeal of what you're saying, basically the content. Now, no matter how good of an orator you are, if your content doesn't meet your purpose, whether it's to convince, motivate, persuade, inform, then it won't resonate. And then pathos was everything outside of the script that connects you to the audience. So that is your delivery, even your use of certain emotions, your pauses, your style, if you will, but also the type of storytelling and the emotion that it invokes. So there's a logical appeal and then there's an emotional appeal. Now, what's often underestimated and not understood is what is this 3rd pillar called ethos? Now, ethos he defined as the appeal from credibility. For Indra Nui, the credibility isn't around her accomplishments. Most people in that auditorium know about her accomplishments and what she's achieved. Adil, if what would be the number one question that was the audience might have about Indra Nui on that day when she's getting the award?
Does she still remember India?
Yes. The most important question for Indra Nui is from the audience members could be, Indra Nui, are you really Indian? You left our country so many years ago. You've been part of this very iconic American company. We don't know how frequently you come in. And so she used that real estate to make that point, that only one point about her background. She says, as Malcolm Gladwell has shared, who you are cannot be separated from where you came from. And that India has always been part of my life. And I experienced two great democracies and a meritocracy, as you said, Adil, that she called United States. But she's saying that this India has always been a part of me. And some of the audience members may not have known that. So by using that time at the beginning to reinforcing that, she is enhancing her ethos or credibility. Now, ethos is often underestimated and tricky. It doesn't mean sharing your resume or boasting when you are coming in as a speaker. There are subtle ways and specific times in which you can bolster your ethos also. You may not need ethos if you're doing a weekly update with your team members, but largely in public speaking, no matter who you are and what your background is, it is very important to have that appeal through credibility too. And that is what she achieves in the first point. Now, I do teach storytelling, and the storytelling traditionally is seen as, well, I'll develop a plot, there'll be a hero's journey. A lot of the Amitabh Bachchan films in the past, they were 3 hour long. There was a hero, unlikely hero, a call to action, some tragedy, song and dance, and then him overcoming the tragedy. But a lot of times in business, in politics, in civil services, you don't have that much time to develop an entire story. So this is perhaps an extreme example of storytelling in just through imagery. The first example she says is, be a lifelong student. Then she's painting 2 images for you. She says that when you were a child, you used to ask a lot of questions like, how is the sky so blue? And how do the birds fly so high? What happens when we grow up? Why does that atrophy? Done. That image is already put into your mind. So point support. This is her logos. Then the second point is around passion for your work. She says, I put my heart, hands, and head into everything I do. I don't see my work as just something that needs to get done, that I see my work as my calling always. So you are imagining her at work, right? That imagery has been set. And the third point is help others rise. She says that today my biggest priority is to see that many of you in the audience will be able to be in position where you can get this award. So you're creating imagery, you're imagining yourself. As the speaker, she's giving you this imagery and creating shorter bursts of stories. And that's why this speech resonates. But one last point on Indra Nui's 2-minuter here is that if you were to watch it again, you'll see that she hasn't really mugged it up by heart, but nor is she wishy-washy about it. She has what I would call internalized the content. And internalize the content comes through time and practice, right? I would suggest that when you're preparing even a short piece, that you start with bullet points, but write it out completely once, practice it, and then go back to bullet points. So it doesn't feel that you are regurgitating on the stage, and the audience understands that. The audience does not bring an intensity for your vulnerabilities, but it is quite sharp when you try to pull a fast one, when you haven't really thought through or internalized what you have to say. As I'm sure, Adil Zainulbhai will be well versed to share, because he's spoken throughout his life. But Adil, I was very delighted that you watched this case study earlier and you also really liked it. I'd love to hear your comments on Indra Nui and this piece.
Well, of course, I know Indra and have interacted with her, so I'm of course a great fan, and so it's easy to see it's much makes it much easier, to look at what she has done and what she talks about. But it is, you are right, that she actually makes a few points, verbal and non-verbal, which were very interesting as she walked up. It was a very interesting thing to see how Indira looks in India in a sari versus how she looks in the US in her other thing. And just what she chose to wear, I think, connected her to the audience.
Yeah.
She was not a
This is
glamour person. She was just
Mhm.
a very, classic look. And, in a sense, she was not trying to be a CEO as she walked up, right? She was trying to be a daughter of India, which I thought was a very powerful message also.
Indeed. Inherently in this purpose, audience, and message framework is the fact that the audience comes before the message, and you have to make the audience the hero. A lot of times when we are invited to speak at events or even to sort of smaller groups, there is a bit of ego that subconsciously comes in. I've been asked to speak. What do I want to say? But if you can take that step back and understand what is my purpose and who is in the audience, what would really connect with them, as you said, from the way I come across to my tone and how I choose to share what I choose to share. If you do that, that really is what makes a communicator rather than just an orator. And I think she has done this really well. You mentioned a point around being able to relate at a level with the audience. In the one of the biggest tragedies in the United States before 9/11 was, well, actually when the Space Shuttle Challenger went up and about 20 million people were watching it live, and it crashed and all 7 astronauts died in national television. When President Ronald Reagan at that time addressed the audience there, and he did just a 4-minute speech across all channels. He canceled his State of the Union address that night and did just a 4-minute speech to honor the astronauts and to provide faith to the nation. And the first sentence that he shared is that Nancy and I are pained to the core by what happened today. So right from the first sentence, it wasn't a president talking down on his audience, but a family member grieving. And that already started off for what is considered one of the greatest presidential speeches of all time in this address for Challenger. So that was Indra Nooyi. You can see we talked about her ethos, right? Her credibility, the logos. You saw how well she was able to create imagery in a short amount of time. This is also something that takes practice. And the pathos was her ability to connect, right from the way she walked, the graciousness, to her tone, her pitch, her use of her arms, the body language, and also the pacing, right? The voice modulation with which she's able to deliver this message, and the fact that she has internalized it. A lot of times people say, well, teach me how to own the room. I say, to own the room first, own the content. And then this will happen
Mihir, just
Yes.
we have about 5 minutes left, and we have some
Yes.
questions from the audience. If you
Perfect.
don't mind, I'll just
Perfect.
throw them at you. So
Great.
one of the questions is, in civil servants typically have to speak in structured meetings, and we have a very hierarchical way of saying anything at any audience, right? First, you start out by recognizing the dignitaries on the stage. Then you, and then you say something that is supposed to be very meaty, and then you say thank you and leave. And what advice would you have for them? Because this is something that civil servants, because of their official roles, feel that they have to they have to communicate in a very structured and stilted way. Any advice for them?
Yes. Yeah. So one general thought, and then a quick response to your advice is I know a lot of times we are there's a cultural aspect to communication in formal settings that's different in the United States, different in India, it's different in Japan. And I recognize we also share our mind space with a number of languages. So getting that kind of sharp words, and perhaps if it's an English address or Hindi address, may not be as easy. But my one sort of specific piece of advice is, before this next message, try to time yourself and then redo the speech in exactly half the time. See what you remember, see what you leave out, and if you feel you have left out something else, then go back and tweak it. But I have actually done this exercise, and I've realized that for most addresses, a little more specifically, I think in our nation, for a number of reasons, but I think a little more in India, but not that different across the world. You are able to actually do a better job and find a more resonant piece if you do it in half the time.
Could you also comment on this part, which is does it take away from what when somebody's asked, does it take away from your seriousness if you try to connect with the audience? Isn't that a kind of a Hollywood, Bollywood kind of a thing to do, to say I'm a great cricket fan and or I'm a this or that? Is that how do you do it in a way that is authentic?
Yeah.
And does it take away from does it take away from the substance of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, here I think I have a good sports analogy. I was very lucky to have been brought up by in a household of athletes. My father, Mihir Mankad, played cricket. Granddad also played cricket. And one of the things that they would say, my dad also coached Sachin a little bit during Mumbai, and for both of them, they had quoted that when you have hit the ball so many times, it appears bigger or it appears to come at you more slowly. And I think the same thing with communication. If you have put in the practice, right, everything seems more seamless, and automatically you don't come across as irreverent, but more relaxed and respectful. And this is one thing about trusting the process. So I tell students, grad students, Harvard, Tufts, and ISB, you're all very talented. You can create a 4-minute speech in 1 or 2 hours, but that is not the bar. I want you to create something that will make your grandchildren proud, which takes about 10 hours on average for a bright graduate student to do. So if you take that time before, if you overestimate the time that is required to get a piece, but then you also are a little, when the actual event happens, you're not that worried, almost demystify it a little bit, it will resonate. I will tell you in my 13th year of teaching, with a lot of online teaching, there was a comment made by one of the participants that, Professor, how are you so calm? I was telling my husband, why can't you be as calm as him? And how do you do this? So I said, I don't think of myself as calm. It's just iterations of doing this over and over again that makes things appear and just almost naturally. There will still be mistakes and vulnerabilities, but the iterations of practice will make you sharper. You also know, Adil, one more thing about short pieces. There's a very famous saying that if you want me to speak for half an hour, give me if you want me to speak for 5 minutes, give me a week to prepare. If you want me to speak for 10 minutes, give me a day. If you want me to speak for half an hour, I can start now. And it really goes when you want to make something very, very compelling.
Yeah. Mihir, that's a great way to end this. I want to give you the final chance to say, what are the couple of messages that we should remember? I've taken a lot of notes, and I hope people who are watching also take away a lot. But if you had to tell everyone to take away one lesson from this short group, and then I'll ask you one final question after that, what would that one lesson be?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I will give you 2 sentences in that one. One is as a summary of what I wanted to cover today. Understand and don't underestimate the speed of speech. Think about content, credibility, and connect as the 3 most important pillars on your communication. Always make the audience the hero. So start with purpose, audience, and then message, and believe in the power of practice to develop what I call as communication presence, something very important but often underestimated. And I think one message, if you will, out of this, but I would ask people to recognize is that, look, I know as a teacher, one of the worst things I can tell a nervous speaker is to just relax. However, one of my own speakers shared when he was asked that, weren't you nervous as a teenager when you gave an address to a large group around a very sensitive topic on same-sex marriage? And he said, of course, I was nervous, but for me, it wasn't about exterminating the butterflies in my stomach, but it was about making them fly a bit more in formation. So a little bit of vulnerability can actually connect, and
that's fabulous, Mihir. And my last question to you is, many people will ask us, okay, great, now that I've heard this, are there any follow-up videos, books, talks that you think I should look at to understand this better?
Absolutely. I think I realize people don't read as much as they should. And I think that's fine because there's just so much of YouTube. But I think and there are a number of talks. I put together, after teaching for a decade, I put together, a collection to really help my student. It's called Minutes of Magic. It has, on the one hand, 80 of the best speech transcripts on 7 themes from my students around the world. They were all 4 minutes or 600 seconds. So it's a great learning through osmosis on your ability to create impact in a short amount of time, but it also has my tips at the start to end. But a couple of other books that I would recommend are one called Resonate by Nancy Duarte. She's an American communication coach. She has taken a modern stance towards the power of visuals and communication and speaking. And another one also by a linguist on the other side of the world. His name is George Lakoff, and his book is called Don't Think of an Elephant. And he has a great theory about why certain parties and, on the right have done a lot better at harnessing the power and simplicity of language and frames, as he calls conceptual structures. So I won't give it away here, but these are 3 books I would suggest you can start with. And then a couple of other talks by, you can pick up some of your favorite speakers. Shashi Tharoor has a great talk at Oxford Union. There's Kiran Bedi, who's delivered some good talks. Even Shah Rukh Khan, the actor, has given a TED talk that actually has a lot of substance. But here I would say I would not like to bias you by specific names, but once you get into this world of watching maybe a speech a week, in a year, you watch 50 of them and you already learned through osmosis. I feel that is one of the best ways to learn this. This is a marathon on learning communication and not a sprint.
Mihir, thank you so much for the advice and the follow-up. We were delighted to have you here. I know you have many, many more examples, and we'll try and find an opportunity to do that. And obviously, a lot more fun to do it in an interactive way. So we will try and plan on doing that. But thank you so much. I know it is very, very late where you are, and thanks for staying up and joining us.
Thank you, Adil. It was a real honor. Yeah, thank you all.